Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we're continuing with our weekly series of Shirim on the Mitteler Rebbe's Shaar HaYichud, and we're going through the Seder HaShtalshlus. And once we gave that short introduction last week about the shift between the world of Rav Chaim Vital and Rav Yisrael Sarug, so now we're beginning to enter into that territory. But before we enter into Parak Tesvav, I just want to stress something about this Sefer, that the Mitteler Rebbe wanted this Sefer to be a guide for each and every person. This was a cheat sheet, so to speak, that would give a person a full spectrum of the Seder Hashtalshalos so that they can contemplate from below to above and then from above to below, and that a person can really understand the general picture and the particular points that make up the general picture, from the very top to the very bottom itself, and for a person to become proficient in that process of ascending and descending. Aside from being tools and the concepts that are necessary for hisbonenus, there's also the natural unconscious hisbonenus that is taking shape in the thinking mind, which is bina, at every moment, which means that aside from being particular forms of information that are meant to be processed by way of hisbonenus, there are also general frequencies of thinking, frames of thought, makifim of the seichel, that become levushim, garments through which a person sees the world. And these concepts that are being conveyed from the depths of the teachings of the Arizal through the lens of the Heilige Baal Shem Tov and the Magid and the Baal HaTanya through the Mitteler Rebbe is giving us a way of looking at Metzias. So in a parak like this, what we're going to see is we're going to encounter things that are speaking about the loftiest ways in which Hashem reveals himself in this world. The dynamism of the Kav or Ein Sof, that ray of infinite light, and the seemingly paradoxical way in which it functions. And a person can ask themselves the question and say, well, what purpose is there in me contemplating these profound ideals, especially at the very inception point of Hashem's presence within this world? What value is it for me? What impact is it going to have on my life? And in a parak like this, we see how these lofty ideas, when processed and when applied and when thought through in a therapeutic way, have such a profound ability to shift the way a person thinks about themselves, about the world, about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, about process, about the changes, about all of the shifts and differentiations that a person encounters in the world, to the degree that beyond just properly contemplating godliness, so that the neural pathways that are formed by way of contemplating these ideals actually become the pathways of revealing Hashem, the Lamed Beis Nesivos Chachma, but they also become therapeutic salves. They become therapeutic frames and makifim that protect the individual in the day-to-day process of being a human being in this world. And with that, we're going to go into Parak Tesvav, where we're describing the Kav. So the Mitteler Rebbe has brought us through the entire process of Tzimtzum and the Halal and the emergence of the Rishimu, and how that Rishimu itself becomes the source of the unfolding nature of the Kav, and how they're not two polar opposites, but rather that the Kav has the ability to reach down deep into that infinitesimal expression of the Nakuda, of the Rishimu, and to schlep it out into expression with the Kav Hamida, with the measuring rod of the Butzina de Kadunusa. Now we're going to be discussing the two paradoxical elements that are taking shape in the Kav at each and every moment, and how this paradoxical opposition, in fact, points to the deepest unity imaginable. V'hanimshal mikol hanal. What does it mean? What's the nimshal? What does it mean to contemplate these ideas of the Kav? Of the fact that on the one hand the Kav is a tzimtzum, on the other hand the Kav is a revelation. On the one hand the Kav is infinite in its nature, on the other hand it is drawing infinitude down into the finite. How is it possible for these two to function? V'hanimshal mikol hanal. And the way to understand this in accordance with ourselves, based on everything we've been talking about, Yuvan bebechinas roishem shenishar bechalal v'makom panui hanizkaleel. It can be best understood when we contemplate the nature of the Rishimu, the irreducible trace of godliness that remains within the void after the Tzimtzum. And in parentheses, the Mitteler Rebbe says as follows: Shehu HaYichud desag shebetihiru ilo k'mo shekasav b'sefer Emek HaMelech. And this Nekudas HaRishimu, this dot, is in truth the last Yud in the Shem Havaya Demilui Yud and Alphin, which is Sag. And that Yud itself becomes the Nekudas HaRishimu, as explained in the Emek HaMelech. Now, in this parentheses, The Mitteler Rebbe just introduced the world of Mahari Sarug, as expressed in the Emek HaMelech. That this Yud of the Sag is already something that's outside of the purview of the world of Rav Chaim Vital in a revealed way, and it brings us back into the world of Mahari Sarug. Now, it's still in parentheses. It's not yet here that the Mitteler Rebbe is going to be unfolding this concept. It's going to be in the next parak. But that's why we gave the introduction to the distinction between the Kabbalah of Mahari Sarug and Maharchu in last week's Shir, because ultimately it's being referenced here. But we're going to keep that in parentheses. What we have to understand is that we're thinking again about the Rishimu, that irreducible trace of godliness that is condensed and contained into a particular point, that remains in the Chalal HaPanui after the Tzimtzum. Shehu b'chinas hiyuli kolel kol ma sheyista'if mimenu al yedei hakav v'chut v'chulei. That this Nekudas HaRoishem, this containment of all of infinitude packed, so to say, into this infinitesimal dot, which is the Yud, it serves as a hiyuli, it serves as the Heilig source of all eventual unfolding, that 0 point of revelation that is not yet something, but it's no longer nothing, and it just contains the possibility of all somethingness to emerge out of it. And in spite of the fact that hiyuli, Heilig matter, is a Greek term to describe the pre-matter form of the emergence of matter, the Heilige Zidichover describes, and the Bnei Yissaschar brings down, that Hiyuli is also a remez to Hashem Yimlech Le'olam Va'ed, and this is why the Ramban brings it in the beginning of Bereshis. That this Nekudas HaRishimu is like this Heilig form of pure potentiality that's going to be the root of all that is eventually going to unfold in particularization from within it by way of the Kav and the Chut. That the Kav is the drawing down of that pure potency of the Rishimu. And even though what happens during the Tzimtzum is that there's a concealment and an ascendancy of the essential light, and that nothing in truth remains other than this infinitesimal dot, which is the Rishimu, which we said that's the Tzimtzum, there's a vacating of everything else for the remaining expression of the dot. But we've already explained the mechanics of Tzimtzum, that the containment is in truth just a condensing of all of the pure potency into one potent form of a dot. So everything is there, it's just there contained within the dot form. So in spite of the fact that everything is gone and all that remains is the Rishimu, that thing that remains, which is the Rishimu, contains within itself everything that is gone as well, as we've explained already. That's the dynamics of the Tzimtzum. וגם משהו הוא מוירה העדר הספשטוס למטה, אין בחינת צמצום גם הוא רק מצד שהוא בחינת כוח היולי וכולי כנזכלל. And in truth, this Rishimu, this Nekuda that appears to us as the absence of expression because it doesn't express itself downwards, that's not the result of an actual absence of that light, but rather all of that light is contained in an infinitesimal way in that Heilig form of the Hiyuli as described above. And the emergence of this potency from within the Nekudas HaRishimu, which is the Kav, the reason that it emerges in a measured way in relationship to the general quality of the original infinite light that was there prior to, is simply because now we have the ability of drawing down that infinite light in accordance with the particularities of expression. And so we have this Nekudas HaRishimu, which is a reservoir of infinitude that is contained within the apparent finite infinitesimal expression of all that there is, in the Nekuda of the Yud. And from within that Nekuda, the Kav extends itself. And the Kav is considered as a detailed, particularized thing in relationship to that Nekudas HaRishimu, even though it's still the highest level of light. And the Mitteler Rebbe continues now when he says, Amnan Yuvein Mahanal. What we're coming to terms with from understanding this dynamism and this polarity and this paradoxical play of concealment and revelation at the heart of the Nekudas HaRishimu, we're beginning to see that these two qualities are also going to express themselves within the Kav or Ein Sof. And this Kav or Ein Sof, this ray of infinite light that re-enters into the Chalal HaPanui, it's also going to have this dualism to it. It's also going to have this apparent dualism to it, which is concealment and revelation, containment and expression. Amnan Yuvan Mahanizka La'el. And we can understand from that which is referred to above, and applying all of the paradoxes that we see by the Rishimu to the Kav makes it far more accessible to us and relevant for us, because the Nekudas Rishimu is still something prior to the emergence of the Kav. That's still on a certain level the Ilamos of Orin Sof. That's the transition from that which is completely unspeakable towards that which we can speak about not being able to say. And that Nekudas Rishimu is still shaykh to the worlds from before. And therefore, the dynamism and the polarities and the paradoxical play at the heart of the Rishimu doesn't necessarily mean something for the worlds below it. But once we apply the same dynamism and the same paradoxical interplay of forces at the heart of the Kav, so now we're already dealing with something that is shaykh for us to begin to talk about, because that's the beginning of what we're able to grasp. And so says the Mitteler Rebbe. Amam Yuvan Mehanal, what can be understood from everything we said above about the Nekudas Rishimu, is that the Kav Zeh yesh bo mekoach haor harishon shelifnei hatzimsum bebechinas ein soif mamish, rak sheba derech kav lefi oifen hamakablim b'chulei. What turns out is that this Kav that is being drawn out of the Rishimu, in spite of the fact that it's a particular ray, it's also containing within itself infinitude. Even though it's expressing itself in a finite, chosen way, nevertheless, it holds infinitude within it, because that's just a side note that we saw by the Rishimu. But now we want to zoom in on that particular quality of the Kav, which is to reveal itself in a particular way. But at the very same point, not to deny the ever-present nature of everything else, but rather to hold everything else within this particular expression. And the reason for this is that the Kav contains within itself a certain potency of that original light that existed there prior to the Tzimtzum, and the element of the infinite light itself. It just so happens to descend down in a particular way in accordance with those who are going to be receiving it. That this Kav is everything and it's one particular thing at the same time. Ubazeh yuvan mashakasav ba'orcha nira'or. And says the Mitteler Rebbe, when we begin to understand the nature of the Kav in this two-pronged way, on the one hand, it's rooted fundamentally in the infinite light prior to the Tzimtzum, yet it is the extension of that light down after the Tzimtzum into particularized forms. We can begin to understand the verse, Ba'orcha nira'or, within your light we shall see light. Meaning to say, there's your light, which is the essential light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to say, prior to the Tzimtzum, Ba'orcha, that which remains transcendent. And there's also Or, which is the light that is accessible to us, which is the light of the Kav. And what we're coming to find is that within the Or that is accessible to us, the Or of the Kav, we experience a presence of Ba'orcha, which is the Atzmius Or from Koydem Tzimtzum. Meaning to say that the light of after the Tzimtzum has a deep connection with the light prior to the Tzimtzum. Moshe Kasav Ba'orcha Nira Or. That from within your essential light, there's going to be an extension of a particularized light, which is the element of a Ha'ara. Just a shine. A light is a shine. It's not the essential thing. Orcha means the ma'or itself, the presence of the source of the light. Or is a particularized light. So says the Mitteler Rebbe, the ha'ara nikra or shel toida, acharat simsum, bokeh ha'or derech hakav ba'alma. This ha'ara, this or that comes about after the tzimtzum, is the particularized birth of a new light, which is the secret of the kav that comes back down into the halal. Aval hu ba me'orcha ha'atzmi liyos shebereshimu haray nichla lakol umimenu nimshach hakav b'chinas hiyuli l'kladus ha'shefel liyos b'chinas malu mata. But this or, this particularized light of the kav, which is after the tzimtzum, is in truth drawing itself from the essential light of orcha, which is contained within the rishimu that remains after the tzimtzum, and it's from within that place that the kav draws itself down in this hylic form of particularized form, in order to be mashpia shefalamata. But the kav we see has a connection to or, which is a limitation of itself, but at the same point it's rooted in orcha, which is unlimited. Because ultimately it's coming from that place of unlimitedness, but nevertheless, the entire purpose of the drawing down of the kav is so that there should be the notion of above and below, at the very least, as is explained at the beginning of Eitz Chaim. And so we see this dual principle to the kav. Mizeh hatam, and as a result of this reason, yuvan teretz al beis inyanim hafachim shenim sabakav. Once we have understood properly the paradoxical nature of the kav, the radical nature of the infinite remaining infinite, even though it's coming down as something finite. With that, we can answer up two questions that we can ask on the kav, because without understanding how both are taking place at once, this capacity of concealment and revelation, and in spite of the fact that the revelation is after concealment, it's still revelatory of all of that which took place prior to the concealment. The only way that we can understand the paradoxical qualities of the Kav is with this information that we just received, which is that in truth it holds two things at once. As a result of this understanding, we can answer up two separate things when it comes to the Kav. Zeh Aleph. The first thing that we have to ask ourselves in what we see is that Asher b'koichoi dafka la'achlala smoila b'yamina v'chulei Shubechinas hesplalus v'hayichudim shal kol ha'oires ha'mesta'afim mekeser da'ak ad malchus da'atzilus ad she'al yodoi dafka yuchluf ha'or b'kli she'ena shalom. That on the one hand we see a quality by the Kav that it has the ability to unify all opposites. It has the quality of hisplalus. It has the ability to reveal how all apparent opposition, all pairs, all binaries that seem to function in opposition to one another are in truth rooted in a hidden unity that rests at the bottom of it, only revealed from a higher place. That das hane'elam, that secret of hisplalus, to show how all opposites are really one, to unify the small and the yamin and the yamin and the small. This ability to be koilel and to be miyached, all of the different lights, from the highest level of the Keser of Adam Kadmon down to the lowest level of the Malchus of Atzilus, to the degree that we have the ability of having opposites unified, that this one light can be in a kli that's opposite to it. And a kli can hold a light that's not its own, as we see in the Seder Shtalshalis, that the light of Chesed can be in a vessel of Gura, as is explained elsewhere, with regards to the Vav of Veha Noira. The Noira of Yaakov Avinu of Tiferes is the Vav HaChibor, which connects two separate things. So on the one hand, we see that the Kav has this ability to unify all opposition, to unify all things that appear to be disparate, to show that all of the tears can actually be mended. That's one quality of the Kav itself, the ability to be koilel and be miyached. That's the first thing that we see by the Kav, its ability to unify all things. But the second thing, Mashanikar b'shem kav hamida, we also see that the kav is the emergence of measure. It's the emergence of above, below, left, right, that which is higher, that which is lower, the emergence of the hierarchical order. It has the ability dafka limdod kol or v'kli. It's the measuring rod that places measure upon all of the lights in the vessels, as is described above. With regards to the kav, which is referred to the ammas habinyan, it's the foundation stone, it's the beginning of measure, v'chulei. This measuring, this differentiation, particularization, categorizations, compartmentalizations that come about as a result of the midah, of the midos that come through the kav, seems to be the polar opposite of the hisklalus that we just saw by the kav, which is the ability to undo all distortion and to undo all separation. And so on the one hand, we have this undifferentiated light of the Kav, which is the Bilti Gvul. On the other hand, we have this fundamentally differentiated light of the Kav, which is the Gvul itself. So how could it be that we have these two opposing things? But these two questions can be answered up in accordance with what we just said, that the Kav contains both of them at once by way of a paradoxical revelation. The truth of the matter is that both of these qualities of the Kav, the Bilti Gvul and the Gvul, the immeasurable and the measure, are both fundamentally true. The adarabba haba hatalya. And the opposite is true. You can't have one without the other. It's specifically from the interplay of this paradoxical upholding of the two parts of the kav that either side can be revealed. Mishum deshayrish zehakav mikayach harishon da'atzmias or ein sof shelifnei atzimtzum huba. Because, like we said, we cannot forget that this kav or ein sof, even though it appears to be appearing so far down the process of all of the tzimtzumim, nevertheless it emerges from the original strength of the essential infinite light that was there prior to the tzimtzum itself. As we described, the orcha dafka nira or, that the or of the kav comes about specifically from within orcha. The kav zeu b'koyach orha atzmus da'in sof, vade yesh lasos b'chinas esklalis v'yichudim shel kol ha'afachim b'chol ishtalshus meireish da'ak ad malchus da'atzilus. And certainly from the tzad that this kav or ein sof is drawing itself down from the infinite light prior to the tzimtzum, expressed within the Nakudas HaRashimu. Avad has the ability to unify all opposites and to create unifications in each and every place and to see all opposites as reflective of a singular truth. From the beginning of the Seder Shtalshalis at the Rosh of Adam Kadmon ad Malchus Atzilus. Avada mitzad or Ein Sof, it has the ability to be koilel everything. When there's a gilui of or Ein Sof, when there's a gilui of bittul, everything is misyachet together. Like the pasuk, like the statement says, "Kamamar antu demiyachet loinu makasher loin ant." This yichud ant echad v'loy b'chushban, your unity, your fundamental light, that infinite light prior to the tzimtzum, has the ability to unify all things. There's no separation in your light. Antu melagoyu melabar, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, you in your singularity prior to the tzimtzum are interior and exterior. You surround and fill and saturate all things. And we also see that the Shem Havaya Dama is also that which extends from the Rosh to the Sof and has the ability to unify all things. Hakolu mitzad ha'aras or ha'atzmas or ein sof shebekav zeh shahoylech v'nimshach ad lamata b'malchus sof kol davar. This ability to unify, this ability to bridge, this ability to see unity at the heart of every separate thing, at every point of differentiation, is rooted in the fact that the kav is a hamshacha of the or ein sof prior to the tzimtzum, as expressed within the radical secret of the rishimu, which is the tzimtzum that contains and condenses all of the infinitude into that particular point of the nekudas rishimu, which then gets schlepped down through the kav itself. And from that perspective, it's everything, and it has the ability to be koilel everything, and it's that koyach of kivoy that has the ability to break through all things. That's what the Ramchal says, not what the Mitteler Rebbe says. And so too, by dint of the fact that it comes from this infinite place, which has the ability to hold opposites within itself, where the oppositional space is still there, but the process gives birth to an upholding of the paradox at the very same time. It's also what ensures that there's also going to be this miraculous ability of the kav to be moided, to measure and to apply measure to things, and to apply limitation, to allow this or to be there and that kli to be there, for there to be differentiation that emerges. From within the undifferentiated light of godliness, differentiation emerges by the way of the secret of the kav. L'chol HaYichud mashpiu makabel, to ensure the proper balance between the or and the kli, the mashpi and the makabel. Kam yiyemad v'man, how much mayim duchrin is going to come down, how much hashpa'a is going to come down from above, and how much Mayim Nukvin is going to go up from below. This secret of particularity. That also comes from the Kav. Mitzad Bechinas Rashimu Hamagvil Chol Or Ha'atzmus Ba'ifanim Shonim. Why? Because the Kav is not Nimshach Yosher from the Orin Soif Kaidam Tzimtzum. It comes from within the Rishimu itself. And within the Rishimu itself, that Rishimu gives the ability to the Kav to measure itself, to measure the infinite light of prior to the Tzimtzum in particularized ways, just as the Rishimu had the ability for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be Meshaer, that infinite light, even prior to the Tzimtzum, in particular ways, an estimation of that which is going to appear in measured ways. And now we see that from the tzad of the essential light prior to the tzimtzum that is expressed within the kav, that the kav becomes this hylic form prior to all forms, and that is the ability to unify all opposites and to show how everything is the same at the core of all of its difference. Umitzad koyach harishimu, but mitzad, the process that the kav is drawing down from the rishimu, it has the ability to be magvil, shabay magvil, shir v'mida l'chol, aderech oisa b'chinas hashir harishon shenichlal b'rishimu. So mitzad the Or Ein Sof Koydem Tzimtzum, it has the ability to be miached. And mitzad the koyach of the hagvala that is revealed within the rishimu itself, which is that secret possibility of tzimtzum, even though it's not taking away, but it's containing, that comes from the rishimu. So the kav is revelatory of both stages, the Or Ein Sof and its capacity to be miached all things, and the rishimu the Or Ein Sof and its capacity to limit things. Aderech mashal uman ha'oisa roishem shemagvil ha'oifen shalamaisem sheyeh hakol meduktok kamo shehuchlet hashir ba'atzmo shaleinatim in v'smo. Just like the architect who is determining the very measure and the details of what it means to develop something and to create something with no deviation away from the left or the right. That's mitzad the rishimu. Va'afal pi she'im lepamim yeh toisles orben etzalim yaser mikfi amamar kavamida. Hainu mikoyach ha'or ha'atzmus dafke she'lepamim yarkach lepamim yarkach. And the fact that all of those rules can change and that there can be a re-entrance of that infinite light that unifies all things back into the halal, that comes from the tzad of the Or Ein Sof that's miskala in the halal, in the kav. Both are true at once. Everything is medukdak and everything is also ready to be shattered from its diktuk at any particular moment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu so desires. The kav is this this unified path of the Gesher Tzar Ma'oid Ma'oid, which has the tzad of the Or Ein Sof, Kodamat Tzimtzum, and also the secret of the Rishimu, which is the Tzimtzum functioning at once. It's meduktak, and it's also has the ability to break open with an immeasurable light at any moment. Ulezehatam, Kol Bechinas Ischadshis Or, Ba'abiyah, Kol Me Atzmus Or Ein Sof Shelifnei Tzimtzum Dafka. And it's for this reason that we say that any re-entrance of light, any hamshachas hamoichen, anytime we do anything, anytime we do a mitzvah, or that we contemplate, or we have a hargasha, or we encounter a midah tova, or we are able to reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu a little bit more, it's all coming from a re-entrance of the infinite light from the Or Ein Sof Mamish Koydem Atzimtzum. Because that's the koyach of the kav. All newness, all his chadshas comes about from the or ein sof that's meskala within the worlds of Atzilus B'ri Yetzira. That's not in accordance with the Rishimu. That's not in accordance with the closed system. This is the secret of the kav being mamshech or ein sof into the halal. The reason for this is that in spite of the measure and in spite of the kav hamida, the fact is that this kav or ein sof is still drawing itself from the infinite light prior to the tzimtzum, which means that it has the capacity to connect to that orcha at any moment, which has the ability to reveal more and more light at any given moment. Od yoter tov. Sometimes it's going to be more, sometimes it's going to be less. And so too in the rectifications that take shape in accordance to each and every parts of, in each and every moment, in each and every sphera, throughout the entirety of history, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has the capacity to measure the infinite revelation of light in accordance with his desire, in spite of the fact that there's also a measured way in which it can be revealed. There's changes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sets in motion, but all of those changes are emergent from that unchanging place that contains change and stability within itself. That all of the changes and the shifts in the amount of Or Ein Sof that is going to be revealed, that comes mitzad HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvoidoi v'atzma kavyochel, the Or Ein Sof from before the Tzimtzum. V'derech klal, hari anu oimrim yehi ratzin milfanecha, milfnei atzmus chamamish l'ma'ala meyitzirus atzmius gamkein lishnei saratzin apashat shekvar nimshach ba'atzmus ha'or Ein Sof, lavei b'shir sheshir ba'atzma yatziyam akav bo'efen acher. And so too, even though there's a set system, and even though there's the kav hamida and things are functioning in the way that they function, nevertheless, when we say Hiratzin milfanecha, what we're awakening within the depths of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that it shouldn't operate in accordance with the measured way that things are prepared already, but rather it should reach deep into the recesses of infinitude to change everything from the beginning to the end. That when we say Hiratzin milfanecha, that it should be your will in front of you, milfanecha milfnei atzmuscha mamish, it should be the Or Ein Sof mamish, shalamala even higher than the midos themselves within the infinite kavyachol, even higher than the yecholes. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu should shift the ratzon hapashat that has already been drawn down from the atzmus of the Or Ein Sof, from the original estimation of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to reveal himself prior to the tzimtzum. We want to awaken it there so that everything should change, down to the bottom of the kav. It should all appear in a different way. All of those changes come about by reaching up into that place prior to changes. When we want the HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be mishana things, midin lechesed, b'chiyah gavna, the ability to be miyached yichudim, that comes from the highest light, as described earlier in Parakeh with the words of Ani Hashem lo shinisi ben ratzon shel chesed ledin, b'or rishon shlefnei tzimtzum. Because it's always chesed, it's always that infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and choy katov lehetiv. And from that perspective, it can always be revealed to be more and more good. And what we need to do is draw that light down, l'matam yasar tvachim. Because in truth, as described in Parak Yud, be'inyan chafetz chesed sheba'atzmus hayudi shenichla ba'atzmus, that in truth, the essential desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to reveal that fundamental goodness and that heilig form of goodness that exists within the chesed, within atzmusis baruch kavyachol, which when we say yehi ratzon milfanechot should be even higher than that. As the Mitteler Rebbe describes before, and he references here, Sheyesh Gimel Madrigos at Shabbat B'Davar Prat. There's the Shir B'Koyach, and then there's the emergence of the impossibility of Koyach, and then there's the Yecholes, all of the three levels prior to the emergence of anything. That's what we're reaching up to. And when we say to him and not to his midos, we're not only talking about the midos of the worlds, we're talking about the highest possible level of midos. We're going higher than higher. We're going higher than the mind can ever possibly fathom when we're reaching up into that infinite realm of Or Ein Sof. Why? Because the Or Ein Sof that we're accessing is beyond all possible measures. Which means to say that the kav has the ability of unifying all things, specifically because it's drawing itself down from that level of ant chad v'lo b'chushban. That light of the infinite light prior to all of the chashbonos of the Yud Sfiros, afilu the Yud Sfiros atzmios kavyachol. And not only this, it's not that the kav has two different koyachs. It's that the singular koyach of the kav has the ability of revealing itself in two different ways. It's echad shu shtayim, not shtayim shu echad. It's the fact that ultimately this capacity to reveal infinitude, as rooted in the infinite light prior to the tzimtzum, is the very koyach that gives shape to the koyach hagvul and the ability to apply limit and measure, and the emergence of the gvul and the emergence of the tzimtzum. It comes from the very same place because the light of atzmusiyas baruch kavyachol contains within itself the capacity of unity and disunity in the very same way. The koyach hagvul is nichlal within the koyach habilti gvul ba'oifen shel bilti gvul, within that Or Ein Sof, and in truth, they both come from that place. It's specifically from the essential light of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that the koyach hagvul and the midah comes from. That element of the reshimu and that hagvala, that also comes from the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why it's kav hamida. The midos are immeasurable measures. They're still rooted in the infinite light itself, in the koyach hagvul bebilti gvul, b'ha b'ha talia. And they're both fundamentally dependent upon one another, as is written elsewhere. The Mitteler Rebbe goes up to the highest places of speaking of the levels within that place where we can't even fathom to conceive of levels, because what the Mitteler Rebbe was fundamentally aware of and keeping us fundamentally aware of is Kedushasi l'mala mikdusha seichem, and no matter what we come to grasp, we'll always find that there's levels there, because ultimately there's going to be a level above that where those levels are nullified. And even the Yud Sfiros ha'atzmius ha'gnuzim b'ma'atzilam kavyachol, with all of the shonus of kavyachol, and the Metzias she'ena b'metzias, even there the Mitteler Rebbe is telling us we're going higher than that. We're going higher than that place. That the chug shabatzmos, the essential qualities of chesed and gevura, the first two impulses of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's revelation, the tzimtzum and the giloi, the or and the kli, those two movements that create the original sha'ashua, the chug shabatzmos or in soif kavyachol, which is the bechina of the koyach hagvul lahagvilu laha'alim ba'atzmusoi iloi achal iloi, that contained within the infinite light prior to the tzimtzum is the koyach and the koyach and the metzias she'ena b'metzias of these yud siros ha'atzmius she'gnuzim b'ma'atzilam, that the Mitteler Rebbe and the Rebbe Shlita says that the Mitteler Rebbe was the first person to talk about these levels, the first tzaddik to reveal these levels. That from within that infinite place, there's also the quality of the koyach hagvul, that capacity of limitation, as Rabbeinu Azriel has explained to us so much. Lahagvilu laha'alim ba'atzmusa, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu also has the ability to limit himself and to conceal himself within himself, be'iloi achar iloi, to ascend, aliyos ein kates, higher and higher, ad ein kates v'shir, hainu or ein soif shel mala ad ein kates v'chulei. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at the very same point, can be mispashit himself downwards, b'chinas espashtus ha'or lamata lamata ad ein tachlis. Because the kav and the reshimu have these two qualities baked into themselves, because that's the fundamental paradoxical unity of the Or Ein Sof, that it contains these two pulsational expressions of the Ratz of Shov. This is mamish gans leshem. This is exactly what the leshem says as well. The chasadim and the gvuros that are rooted in the highest place of the tzimtzum and the halal. Ubeiz kavim kshulim heima b'bechinas ein soif. And in truth, these two kolchos are fundamentally unified within the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Mitteler Rebbe uses this lashon earlier when discussing the nature of the self and the chedva and the bechia, that they also have to be two kaven shkulim dabada. Because in truth, the two kaven shkulim dabada within the Yiddish heart is also the two kaven shkulim dabada in the light of the infinite kavyachol. Imkain gambi ridas ha'orda in soif bekav, so too even after the light descends down by way of the drawing down of the infinite light into Metzias, Shkulim beis koiches halalu. These two kochos are strengthened side by side, one against the other, litzamsim lahagvil, to contain and to limit, or lechabiru liached, or to unify. At any given moment, both options are equally available. And sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less, but there's always the possibility of being mamshach more and more. All of the changes and the shifts, they come about from the highest place imaginable. They're all contained within that place, so to say, in an unchanging way. And so too the difference between the Beis Hamikdash and the times of exile. They are two unified expressions that are emergent from a singular place. This is why Rafael Parcher and Rav Yitzchak Isaac Hamler had the ability of saying, based on the Balatanya, that there's certain tzaddikim that the Beis Hamikdash was never destroyed for. Because in truth, the Beis Hamikdash and Golos come from the same place. That come from the essential quality of the infinite light. As we explained above, the kav is still infinite in relationship to the emergence of the functioning of space, which is the shetach. In spite of the fact that it's measured in orientation to the Rishimu, nevertheless it's limitless in orientation to the shetach. It has the ability to measure from within that infinite quality within itself. And this kav draws down the infinite light by way of the tzimtzum itself. That even the revelation of the kav, even the tzimtzumim of the kav also are reflective of the Or Ein Sof. Every moment has these two options. Every moment, every part of the self has these two kavim, shkulim dabada. We should be zoichet to always reveal more and more of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lamata, lamata, and lamala, lamala, biyachad be'ezras Hashem.